It is 5:30, and so we will be getting our board meeting started. Ms. Lister, could you do the roll call for us, please? I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I am looking for a motion. Would it be maybe be connected? It is. If you click on 2.1, Mr. Munoz, would you read the motion for us?
Yes, ma'am. I
Thank
move the
you.
Board of Education of USD 501 recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss confidential personnel matters to protect the privacy of the individual being discussed pursuant to the personnel exemption in the Kansas Open Meetings Act. The board will return to open session at 6:02 in the boardroom. Dr. Anderson and executive staff are invited into executive session.
Thank you. Can I have a second on that motion? Dr. Schumacher? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lister.
I need to vote by hand.
It's on there now.
And it raises my computer. It just says your authentication to the server has been locked.
Oh.
Yay. Okay. Are you a yay?
Is there anybody in IT in the group?
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. For anybody that may be online, we will be out of the room for 30 minutes and we appreciate your patience.
And we
Thank you for your patience. We're glad to be back. Do we have anything for our Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
We just have to, we'll just say it.
Oh, no, we should have someone join us for the pledge. Oh, my. Would you like to join us for the pledge? You're a new custodial supervisor, correct? Yes. It would be an honor to stand next to you, so come on up and I'm gonna say it with you, all right? You don't, okay. All right. All right, you want to come up for the pledge? She said that'll help her remember all the whole pledge, all right.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as our supervisor, I know we'll be mentioning custodian appreciation. Can you share your name and how long you've been in the district?
My name is Jessica Rodriguez, and I've been for the school district for 2 years.
And she is our new custodial supervisor. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. So it has been a tough week or two for our school families and our community families and even our community. So I'm hoping that you will join with me for a few moments of silence as we think of those families, those students, our community during this really hard time. So if you could just give me a few, I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to thank our school staff and mental health teams that have been out trying to support and help our families, our students that may have witnessed things that they should have never had to. And I just appreciate everything that our schools are doing for those families and our students. Thank you all very much. So I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second? Ms. Schmidt?
The vote is open.
Thank you.
Dr. Bonebright, you want to vote by hand? Yes, okay. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I also noticed that we have somebody brand new at our tables. I believe Mrs. Sharp. We welcome you to the tables with us. We appreciate you being here and we congratulate you on your new position. It's wonderful to have you working for our district and doing the wonderful things that you're doing. Thank you.
And Ms. Sharp got 2 applauses because we did that last time and Ms. Bowley was at her grandson's birthday. So she gets a chance as president to again extend on behalf of the board. We are excited to have you as part of the team. At about 6:10, we'll be starting with our lobbyists, but we do have 2 special individuals here. And so then we'll put a pin in our highlights, go to our lobbyists. But one highlight was being on Telemundo, which was pretty exciting. And so we will get a chance to watch that video as we conclude Hispanic Heritage Month, but continue our celebrations in bilingualism. We'll come back to that. Instead of reading these wonderful proclamations that say the same thing every year, we thought it's nicer to have someone that come up and share how many individuals we have, in this case, physical therapy, as well as audiology, how many people we have, how many students are served. If you have a question or two for Dr. Harrington, our General Director for Special Ed, she's here to answer that. But later, when you adopt the proclamation, rather than reading it, she's here to just share some information and you'll be adopting this proclamation. Dr. Harrington.
Good evening. I would like to just extend my appreciation for all that you guys have done for our students and for our staff. So some of our very important members of our team are our audiologist and our physical therapists. We have one person that serves in the audiology department. I believe this is her second full year with us, and she does all of the screenings for our preschool students and then any of our students that fail the initial screening by the school nurse to make sure that what the audiogram shows and how much hearing they actually have. And she's also licensed in hearing aids. So we were very fortunate to have her join us, our staff, 2 years ago. In the department as well, under related services, we have physical therapy. So we have 2 physical therapists and 2 physical therapy assistants. And between those 4 individuals, they serve 120 students, helping them learn how to transfer from, a bus into a wheelchair or from a wheelchair into the student desk. We have a gait clinic that operates at Quinton Heights Elementary, and they go there to work on gait therapy. So we just really have that attitude of helping them be able to access their environment when they're at school so that they can benefit from their education.
With that, since Dr. Lockling isn't here, and her picture, we only have one, so it's easy to have her picture on here. We want to thank our Dr. Lockling, who's been with us for 2 years, and all that she does for our audiology students in need of audiology support. We also want to thank all of our physical therapists, many of whom have families, and they're home with them this evening, and we freed them up to be able to do that. And Dr. Harrington is standing in their stead, but we know they're all listening in. Any question or two before we move to our custodian appreciation?
Do I have any questions down there? We sure appreciate everything that they do. I got to witness some of that at Quinton Heights the other day of 2 people assisting a student and entertaining them as she waited for her bus to come and pick her back up. So it was very enjoyable to watch their interaction. So we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
Absent of a question, and with that final comment, here's going to be a change this year. When we have principal for the day, we thought it might be nice to have legislatures, when they're assigned to principals, perhaps assign them to a special ed department where they can actually see the level and depth in which we serve students beyond even the traditional classroom. So Dr. Harrington, I've yet to talk about what can that look like, but we're excited about inviting legislators and giving them a deeper dive into why we need full funding for special education. Dr. Harrington, thank you for all that you do.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that great idea. I like that.
Our next person is Mr. Seitz will be introducing our new custodial supervisor, and he's going to just give a couple of facts about our custodial department. And when he concludes, we'll be moving right into hearing from Mr. Jim Edwards. We'll bring up Mr. Rob Seitz. And Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. As Dr. Anderson already mentioned, Jessica Rodriguez is our new custodial supervisor for the district. While this is her first school year supervising all of the custodians in the district, she actually was the building operator at Chase. And so I'd like to give my personal appreciation for her past good work and now her work in overseeing the rest of the custodians in the district. We have 99 custodians employed in the district. Most of those are all employees of Topeka Public Schools. We do supplement that a little bit with Sanchez cleaning services where we fall short, so that we make sure that we can offer the service we need to at all the schools and buildings. And I would just say that the custodians, while they're tasked with cleaning and disinfecting our schools, they do so much more on a day-to-day beyond what their normal scope of responsibilities are. They're mentors and role models to students. If any of you have had the opportunity, which I assume you have, to walk through our schools and you see one of the custodians and you see how the students will just walk up to them and show so much respect, they help in a lot of other ways. And This is our time to say thank you to all of our custodians in the
I do
district.
a lot of moving around, let's just say that. You know, I get here at 6 a.m. It's not a one-man show. You know, there are 8 of us that have to do what we do every day. We get the building to open up and get the lights turned on, and we're off to it. When I first started here, I always used to read a saying, and it said, you can get there from here. And that always kind of stuck with me.
I just enjoy it, and I've always enjoyed being here. You want to come every day because the people here are really nice, and the kids need to be in a clean environment. It makes them want to come to school more. And I even see kids on the street now, their jobs, and they're like, hey, I remember you from Capital City. It makes me feel good.
You never know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. We really try hard to do our jobs great, and we love to hear when we're doing good, even from outside people. We get a lot from parents. I love to hear when parents say the building looks great.
I have a very good relationship with the kids. That's part of my being in an elementary school, working in a school, because I love being around the kids. I love interacting with the kids. It's part of being a custodian. You have to be able to get along. It's an honor. We try our best, to keep our buildings clean, but it's just a privilege to be able to say that I've done that.
To my fellow custodians, just thank you, because I, for one, know the work that they put in. Just thank you, and continue to do what you do.
Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Seitz. And Mr. Schaefer is not here today, but also Mr. Schaefer, he was the former custodial supervisor. On behalf of Topeka Public Schools, we acknowledge the custodian department for outstanding service to TPS students, staff, and families. Thank you for your past and continued good work. Thank you, sir. And at this time, our lobbyist is with us to prepare for that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Madam President, as we conclude highlights. And I know that Mr. Garrett and Communications team will be taking photos of our team members that are here this evening, and we'll come back to highlights when we're done.
That sounds wonderful. Well, we want to welcome Mr. Edwards to our board meeting tonight. I know that some people have some questions that they sent in beforehand, and we are going to let you get started, and then we will chime in when we need to. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, can everyone hear me? Can you just raise your hand if you can? Not so worried about visual, just want to make sure that you can hear me.
We hear you perfectly.
Super, thank you. First, I want to thank Superintendent Anderson and President Boley for allowing me to do this by Zoom. I had a library trustee meeting this afternoon. I've got a dinner this evening, and we're able to allow this report to be given by Zoom. So I do appreciate that, and thank you for that. I had the questions that had been sent. I'll go through those. Let me say first, before I start on those, that the House and Senate had an interim education committee meeting that was held 2 weeks ago on a Friday and on Thursday and Friday, and then on the following Monday and Tuesday. So a lot of the answers, some of the answers that I'll be giving you to the questions that were asked, come from the tone of that meeting. So first of all, Dr. Bonebrake had a couple questions, and first one was, why do retired teachers have to pay a CAPERS penalty if they return to work? That goes back, probably 10, 15 years to when CAPERS was not doing well. And so the legislature looked at the issue, and it all became mathematical, I'll say. Teachers were retiring because they had their 80 points. They were retiring and then coming back to work. And the problem with that is that if districts had hired new individuals to come into those positions, they would have been paying into CAPERS. When you're actually having people that were receiving CAPERS funds, but nothing was being put into the future. It's almost like an insurance policy. If you're not getting the proceeds in, but still paying out the claims, sooner or later you're gonna go broke. So that was the main reason the legislature did it. And I'd have to ask. I believe that amount is now, or was 19%, which was approximately what Capers was, or what districts were putting into Capers. And I need to go back in the, I believe it was early 70s, when you had the teachers Capers program separate from the big umbrella Capers. And when they took that under, there was already a shortage. And so the legislature, when they decided to charge districts that had retiring teachers come back, basically paying in that amount, they were receiving pressure from those Capers, arenas, firemen, policemen, state government that was well, not fully funded, but much better actuarially than the teachers fund was. So that, Dr. Bonebrake, if that answers your question, could you just raise your hand? Or if not, let me know.
Why can't we just not have them receive Capers retirement funds when they come back to work, since it's probably temporary and we need teachers?
They could do that, but that would be a decision on the teacher themselves, not the district. An individual would have to, and you're getting in some areas that I'm not totally familiar with. I'm familiar with the change that was made. And so the reason they made it was to keep people from not paying in, occupying positions, but not paying into Capers.
But if they don't take out, then there's no negative balance while they're working again. We're at a teacher shortage and we could use some experience.
Oh.
And this is sort of mitigating against that.
It is, it's not, I do not believe it's the sole reason that there's a teacher shortage. As you all know, I retired from my last lobbying job in 2012. And probably for 5-6 years before that, sitting in education committee hearings with then Deputy Secretary of Department of Ed, Dale Dennis, he was explaining at that point that we were going to be facing a teacher shortage. And you combine that with the fact that, and it probably wasn't solely because of money, it was more of sometimes a pervasive attitude by certain legislators towards educators.
And Mr. Edwards, as you have answered that question, one of the things I do want to mention, Dr. Bonebrake, and to the full board, you have in front of you the One United Voice. On that One United Voice, we have under teacher recruitment, Capers, but this Capers piece is really about addressing Tier 3 so that people have a better retirement and young people who are just coming into the profession have a better retirement. So we asked for it last year, and we would like to still ask for that. This is all of the districts combined together. So this is the document from last year with a few revisions thus far based on some of the feedback from the other guys. I just love calling them that. And one day it'll be all the other guys and gals. But until then, it's the other guys and I have talked about this piece. But as you all have conversation, if you want some other changes for your one legislative voice this evening, we'll be getting to that. So Capers is listed there as well, Dr. Bonebrake. Mr. Edwards, I'm going to turn it back over to you of other items you'd like to point out and discuss and or questions you want to answer.
Sure, thank you. SPED was the second question that you asked Dr. Bonebrake, and that was, and that issue was, they dealt with that issue the second day of their interim hearings. There's a lot of finger pointing. There's finger pointing that of course, the feds have never met their projected goal. So the state points the finger there. Districts are not getting what they should. And the fact remains, and they did have the positive aspects of those hearings, or the positive things that came out of that hearing, was that you did have individuals in the profession, special ed, that talked about the increasing numbers and the increasing costs of dealing with that. That is going to be an issue, continues to be. And the legislature is going to say, well, we don't have the money. We're either going to give it to you in Bay State aid, or we're going to give it to you in special ed. But those lines are already forming. The next one is, you asked questions about state assessments. Most of you have probably read the newspaper accounts of the audit that was done on districts and state assessments, and whether there has been improvement. If you were to have sat in the same meetings that I did and listened to the dialogue that took place, and then read today's article on what was actually said in the audit, you'd be scratching your head. There, as I say, the battle lines were, as I mentioned earlier, are already forming on special ed as well as general state aid. They're also forming on, well, if schools aren't performing, which there are certain legislators that say that in the audit, and I can only say what was in the newspaper by the education reporter. It was much different than what you have legislators saying, as far as they said that money does make a difference. They talked about money going into teacher salaries as well as administrative areas. So that's going to be one that I think in general, I think you're going to see, you have to understand that education is the largest pot of money in state government. And I somewhat jokingly say that somebody said, well, they asked Jesse James, well, why do you rob banks? And he says, well, that's where the money is. And so when you see individuals, or when you see legislators that are pressing such issues as vouchers, such issues as homeschooling, and creating funds to be used for that, that's because the money is in education. And if there's places to go, that's where they're going to look. Let me see. You talked also, Dr. Bonebrake, about Emporia State and Washburn as far as students enrolled. As I started off by saying, this is not a new issue. It's been around, and I think all of us would have to say, if we're a young adult and we really have a desire to help others, to help young adults, to help kids in schools, we might consider teaching. But then when you look at everything else that's going on around that, and how educators are being viewed, it's tough. I think we'd only have to ask ourselves, would we want to go in there? Would we want to go into the profession ourselves? Did I cover that, Dr. Bonebrake?
Yes, you did. It's just that the legislature expects the state to have the students on an educational par with the rest of the world. But our educational system is nowhere near what the rest of the world is doing. We're short several weeks of school in the year. We're short experience and the teachers. Everybody here has heard the story multiple times, but I have a niece in Germany, teaches 10.5 months a year. She had take-home pay $60,000. She'd have a PhD if she turned in a thesis, and she'd get even more pay. But she gets these credits toward advanced degrees as she is working and teaching. But Europe and Scandinavia are so far ahead of us in how we're teaching our children. And if we just dump money, that's right. But we need to increase the school year, increase the teacher education and pay. We need qualified people teaching. And just, they're right. Legislature's right. Just dumping money is not going to do it. But this targeted spending, reading that article in the newspaper, if I had any hair, I'd pull it out.
Mr. Edwards, I was going to turn it back over to you. Any other overall comments that you'd like to say, targeted to any questions or any other comments you'd like to share, sir?
I will. There was a question, and I believe Ms. Campbell asked about the Parent Bill of Rights, and I believe Ms. Whiteman sent the full bill and what happened with that last year. It's going to be back. The issues that did not survive gubernatorial veto did not make it out of the House or the Senate that still tie into quote a Parent Bill of Rights. It will be back. I normally don't make predictions on legislation because although I'm normally correct, it's just that it's this legislature is pretty firm on having certain issues passed. The other issue, let me see, I'm here. Okay, well, and the question on Bill of Rights, vouchers is they're now called student. Well, they've tried to pick out every name they can except vouchers, because that does have a negative implication in many individuals' minds, and but it will be back. The scholarship issue, and they'll call them scholarships, they'll call them anything but vouchers, but that will be back too.
So Mr. Edwards and I met this week, and in the meeting, we strategized about, unless there's another question, I think that was the last one, Ms. Stewart Campbell's, and then I'll share kind of our strategy and then turn it back over to the board to ask any other questions of Mr. Edwards and to give feedback on the legislative platform. Our strategy, we anticipate next Thursday that we'll have a Zoom open opportunity for any teacher or parent that would like to join that Zoom for legislative advocacy. That Zoom will have an opportunity for 2 breakout sessions, one for parents and one for teachers. And we thought we might approach things a little differently. Mr. Edwards may give an overview of things such as fully funding special education. We'll make sure people know about our platform and what that is. But we will be letting people know that we need their help. We need some people that are willing to write, that want to write letters to their senators. We need people who like to speak and want to go to hearings and actually speak about certain bills that come up over the course of the year. And we also need people who just want to come and show up and stand in solidarity as we address issues, so that we have a parent group and teacher group. Mr. Edwards will share that, for those, for example, that would like to write their senator now and introduce themselves and perhaps introduce our platform. And he'll guide them in that space. He's willing to give training to people as well for parents or teachers that would like a training session on certain kinds of things. And so that's what that is about, really to galvanize our efforts and to bring everybody together around what can they do. And then as bills come up, then we'll be giving that group and others updates on those bills so that they can actively watch them and choose things that they'd like to speak to, come to. Our time to speak to the legislature every year, the guys and I come together and we present. We have about 30 minutes. They have 15, we have 15, so we combine and always have our time with theirs, so we all get 30 as one voice. That is on November the 29th at 10 to 10:30. And this year, when we talk about special education, we'll be doing that a little differently. And rather than just reading and superintendents sharing that. So that's at least a strategy in terms of really involving everyone across the community. Did I leave anything out, Mr. Edwards?
No, you covered it.
And then, of course, principal for the day. We are excited that we're inviting our legislators to come again and shadow principals, but perhaps rather than just being at a school, giving them some unique and different experiences to really look at special ed in particular. I'll turn it back over to you, Madam President, for any questions for Mr. Edwards.
Are there any other questions on the board panel here? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for this update. My question / concern, some people have heard me talk about this before, is the lack of oversight for kids who are homeschooled. So we know there are some wonderful parents out there doing an amazing job homeschooling. And we also know that there are families who pull their kids out of school because educators are mandatory reporters and they don't want to be reported to DCF. So now the child is at home getting zero education. So that's my comment. My question is, has the legislature discussed this at all? Might there be any hope that some type of oversight we could see that in the future for kids who are quote unquote homeschooled?
I doubt very seriously you would see this legislature in its present structure do such a thing. And I agree, and that's when I've and we used to call them vouchers when I lobbied against vouchers, and in fact 2 organizations, of course, Kansas Association of School Boards, but also the state chamber used to have policies against vouchers, but it was always that there was no oversight. Money would be put in, and the assessments don't have to be done. They don't have to or state assessments are not required. And which always amazed me, because when they sometimes complain that, legislature doesn't have oversight over public ed, they take it one step further and give money to homeschools or even some, of course, charter schools in Kansas have to be under a school board, but yeah, it boggles my mind. So in answer to your question, I doubt very seriously you see that happen with this present legislature.
Okay, thank you. I won't get my hopes up.
Mr. Edwards, I had a question. I know you sat in on those hearings just recently. I know last year there was some rumblings about using an Oklahoma state model of giving money to individuals to open up unsupervised schools. Did you hear anything of that happening?
Not Oklahoma, but there were, it seems like all these other states have these great ideas on student scholarships, and some other states actually call them vouchers still, but no.
Thank you. I'm referring to an Oklahoma situation where the people are allowed so much money per student and from the state to open a building, but then the buildings aren't checked on, but people are receiving the money. So no education necessarily happening there, but they're receiving the money for those students with no accountability. So I'm glad to hear that that wasn't being spoken of. It sounds like from the research I've looked at and from their comments, it's not a very good model. So that's at least good news, right?
No, well, and I don't want to leave you with the impression that overall topic wasn't discussed. Specifically, Oklahoma was not addressed.
We thank you very much for being here tonight and answering our questions. We feel very confident having you as our lobbyist and being our voice for public education. We thank you for doing that.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for what you do. I think as Superintendent Anderson talked about what the plans are. The most important thing that can be done is for legislators to be contacted by individuals in their district. Somebody once told me that all legislators have one thing in mind, and that's to stay in office. And when individuals within their district contact them, it's very helpful. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. So with those plans that we shared moving forward, as we continue that next Thursday timeframe, we selected that day because a lot of PTOs happen on Thursdays, the off Thursdays from board meetings. So we know many PTOs will be in session during that time. So we'll pick an evening time, and I believe we discussed, I think it was 4:30, and then a overlapping PTO times, and then a time for just school staff to be able to join that as well while they're still in session. Teachers get off at 4, so 3:30 for any school staff. I have received countless emails since the staff-wide celebration of people saying, count me in, count me in. You know, when are you gonna, I haven't gotten the email. I want you to add my name to the list. So I'll send in all staff out to say if they've already sent something to just still come to the Zoom because it was more names than I could keep track of. So we're excited about people being excited about this piece. Even the drumline said, can we march to the Capitol together? And so we will continue to decide what this looks like. In front of you is the One United Voice. I would ask for the board to take a look at that. And as you hang on to it today, if you certainly have feedback today, feel free to give that. I'll share some of the adjustments that have been made thus far. But more importantly, when you take it with you tonight, if over the next week you have some adjustments you'd like to make, just send me the email. We adjust it in that way. When my colleagues and I meet, we will go over some things that we heard to tweak this, and then I'll bring this back at the first meeting in November. The first change we made was we moved special education from the bottom to the top. And while all three of these are still equally important this year, bless you, as they were last year, we want to make sure to add that to the top. I anticipate some of the bullets under special education. There will be more bullets. I know Ms. Boley and I met, and there's a KSB document that you have that you might be discussing this evening. And some of those bullets that aren't general, that are a little more specific, might be added under here as examples. The other area that we are changing, which is really just a logistical piece, photos and things like that. But Ms. Boley suggested, which was a great idea, is that if there's some way, one year we spoke, and I believe it was Senator Dietrich that said, what is the economic impact that we have in the community? So with Dr. Kipp's help, we created this, numbers, how many teacher jobs are created. And we have that there. Well, now maybe a similar graphic for special education, like how much are we underfunded? How many more students could we serve? What's the gap? Not really sure what this will look like and how each district could contribute a number that would be powerful. But we may play with that economic impact graph in some way and change it to a special education graph in some fashion, or add a graph. Those are the two key items that we know will be changing. Are you comfortable with these three areas being the broad topics, but our main focus being on special education this year that we really spend our time speaking to? I see heads nodding.
Mr. Munoz.
Just a quick question on the beginning here in front, induced jobs versus indirect jobs. Would you care to elaborate what the difference between those two?
Under economic impact. Now,
Induced versus-
we may not end up having this graph at all for this upcoming year. So I think you're talking under the 2,144 teachers create a spinoff. Is that what you're talking about? Of 600.
278 additional induced jobs and 621 indirect jobs. Am I reading the same thing you all are?
Mhm. Which occurs when they respend their dollars in the community by.
I was
going-
just asking the difference between induced jobs and indirect jobs. What does that mean?
Well, in the way that I'm reading that from previous, the question was, how many jobs are created as a result of funds that are spent in the community, that without those funds being spent, these added jobs, hairstylists, dentists, and those things would not be created. I believe that's where that came from. So because our teachers are spending money here are some new jobs that wouldn't even exist, wouldn't even be occurring. Again, this economic impact, which we've had for 2 years, won't be here next time, potentially. Just to give them, one, a different look and feel, and two, to focus on special education. And then the indirect jobs, it comes from suppliers of goods and services to our employees in terms of purchasing equipment, materials, in terms of spending dollars in those areas. So ones are jobs and ones are materials and equipment in that regard. In terms of making other changes, of course, the Shawnee County combined facts. Many of us had stabilized enrollment, so that'll also be changed for the final document. Since everyone is okay with these three areas, then if with your blessing, I'll proceed with working with my colleagues on what the bullet points might be and added feedback. And then I'll look for any feedback that you want to give me over the next week. And then massage that language and share that with our colleagues so that we end up with one document representing all of our districts in the county. Thank you. And that concludes the piece that we have on legislation under the superintendent's report. As we've concluded, Madam President, if I may, I'd be remiss if during Hispanic Heritage Month, and we've also been celebrating our Filipino students and families as well this month, and they wanted to make sure I mention that. Next time, we will make sure we have a video and all of that for our families in that space. But we would like to just show the clip that was on NBC. If you have an iPhone, you would have gotten it in English on NBC. Mrs. Lister got it from a family member in California who sent it. We were all excited in English, so we got a chance to rewatch it. But we have one of the clips, and there were two. When Telemundo visited the GTP in the city, they were so taken with what we're doing at Scott Dual Language, they decided while filming to come back a second day just to spend time at Scott. So there's an impromptu visit at Topeka High. And then it just so happened that morning I asked, and Mrs. Dr. Mejia just did a great job with really being my person to help liaison these pieces when I'm contacted and we're contacted as a highlight. And it just so happened, I asked Mr. Munoz, we were at the ICC, that they're going to be here. And I told Mr. Ross, since Mr. Munoz is a parent there, maybe he could be interviewed. And he said, I'm already volunteering. So it was not staged. He was already planning to be there reading to students at the time that we were filming. All of that was already in motion. So with that, that's the cue up. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Gowan and team.
En la primaria Scott en Topeka, Kansas, la inmensa mayoría de los estudiantes son hispanos, orgullosos de sus raíces. La escuela se distingue además por su programa bilingüe, como su directora.
Para mí es un honor y yo creo tanto en lo que hacemos aquí de enseñar a nuestros estudiantes que hablan inglés en casa a aprender español y los que hablan español en casa a aprender inglés.
La mitad de las materias se imparten en inglés y la otra mitad en español.
Es fascinante cómo ellos interactúan, cómo se ayudan, cómo el niño de español a veces le explica en inglés al otro o viceversa.
El programa dual de la primaria Scott está atrayendo a niños de otros grupos demográficos.
Si un estudiante no sabe mucho de español, los maestros o maestras pueden ayudar en inglés.
Ellos son Ivy y Winston. No provienen de familias hispanas. Los inscribieron en Scott por el programa bilingüe.
Cuando llegaste no hablabas ni una palabra.
No habla español.
Nada de español.
Pero ahora tiene. Puedo hablar un poco de español.
Sus familias entienden las ventajas de aprender un segundo idioma.
Sin duda, cuando hay dos personas igualmente calificadas y una es bilingüe y la otra no, siempre la persona bilingüe es quien va a obtener ese trabajo.
Los hijos gemelos de Lalo estudian aquí. Él también vino a esta escuela. Es nacido en Topica, hijo de padres mexicanos.
Es muy diferente el Topica de hoy al Topica de cuando tú eras niño.
Yo creo que sí. En ese tiempo, en los 80s, no había muchas familias que hablaban español.
En el distrito escolar de Topica, los estudiantes latinos representan más del 33% y pronto podrían ser el demográfico más numeroso.
El programa bilingüe de Topica es el único en el estado de Kansas que abarca los 3 niveles educativos previos a la universidad, desde el elementario, primaria, hasta el high school o preparatoria.
Aranzazú es maestra de la preparatoria o Topica High School. Da clases en español.
Pero creo que realmente es una forma muy buena de mejorar la comprensión y la convivencia. Muchos problemas, a lo mejor sociales, se solucionan cuando uno entiende cómo piensa el de enfrente.
De acuerdo con la superintendente del distrito escolar, la asistencia a clases y los resultados académicos han mejorado gracias al programa bilingüe. Estamos hablando que el 95% de los estudiantes del Topica High School se gradúan, afirma muy orgullosa. La subdirectora de la escuela.
My name is Lisa Myers Martinez.
Lisa Myers nació y creció en Topica, pero su esposo es mexicano y sus hijos asisten a la primaria Scott.
Me parece la cosa más hermosa que he visto, ver a mis niños crecer en esta escuela hablando español, hablando inglés, conociendo gente de Puerto Rico, El Salvador, España.
En esa escuela Magnet, la primaria bilingüe Scott, están convencidos que son un ejemplo para el país.
Quiero, hacer una diferencia y eso es mi escuela y mi pasión.
It's a pretty long segment. Unusually so. You don't normally see a segment that long. And that was day 2, because there was another segment on the city of Topeka. We couldn't be more proud. I have the privilege of serving on the GTP and being on the executive board. And so Bob Ross and all that the GTP is doing to highlight and help highlight and partner with what we're doing for bilingualism, but for Ukrainian families, for just really highlighting cultural diversity is tremendous. So I thank them, but I thank you as our board for allowing us to do the creative and innovative things. We did want to mention, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this about our communications team, the marketing and the public relations we feel like we're doing with dual language from the Magna Award to, I think, Dr. Kip, are you behind me? He is presenting with, is Dr. Mejia? She's not here this evening. They're presenting next month, right? To the State Board of Education. They presented nationally last year. We've been in magazines. We just feel like we really are the leading, the leading game in town, not only in Kansas, but beyond. Since it's aired, we've had about 5 people from other states reach out, 2 from Atlanta that reached out to Bob and asked about, how can they be in this space? And so I just think it's been exciting. I did ask Dr. Kip to give me an update on native Spanish speaking and native English speaking families. And based on, I may say this roughly, I guess about a little bit, almost 50% are English speaking, a little bit over 40% or so. 44% are English speaking students who are attracted, are attracted to Scott Dual Language. And 56% are native Spanish speakers. And we just put some of the features. It's important for us to remember that. So sometimes we want to put that in front to say we continue to shine now internationally for our dual language program. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Madam President.
Thank you. Isn't it exciting to get national coverage like that and even California? How positive is that? So we have somebody here who wanted to come and see our meeting because she might want to come back and have a public communications with our board. And I will tell you that our meeting is a little bumped around. We're not following our agenda as we should because of our lobbyist who needed to come in at a certain time. But at this particular time, which would have come earlier, I need to ask if I have any public communications tonight. Thank you. So our next position is I need business by consent, and I need someone to read our motion. We don't have the paperwork tonight.
It's on the computer. It should be right there in the motion section.
We will look for it.
7.1.
Madam President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign the special project and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Tatum?
The vote is open.
Thank you.
All right, the vote is closed and the motion carries.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, I have here superintendent's report on legislation. Is there any more that you need to add at this time?
No, ma'am, there's nothing more.
So we've got that covered. Thank you. And we need to discuss request approval for a published notice of hearing for proposed non-resident enrollment policy.
And Mrs. Whiteman will be speaking to that.
Thank you.
Members of the board. I can speak without a mic. Thank you. The item on the agenda is there to update you on the progress of the board policy committee to implement the legislative changes related to non-resident students. If you recall, in 2022 and 2023, the legislature amended the statutes on who can attend public schools to basically open it up to all non-resident students who would like to attend USD 501 once it is determined that there is capacity for to allow them to enroll. So the purpose tonight is just to ask your permission to do the first step of the implementation, which under the first item on your agenda is a summary of the new legislation, and under section 4 are the requirements that the board has to do, which is basically they have to adopt a policy to allow non-resident students to enroll. But before the board can adopt that policy, the new law requires that it be published in a newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks, and then that the board hold a hearing to hear from the public on the proposed policy. The timeline would be that with your permission, we will proceed to publish the proposed policy changes that the board policy committee has been reviewing for 2 weeks. And then on November 2nd, you will hold the public hearing to hear comments from the public, to ask questions. And then the new law is so specific that it says you cannot adopt the new policy until the meeting after the public hearing. So that would be November 16th. So with your permission, we will go ahead and publish the notice of the hearing and then hold the hearing at your November 2nd board meeting.
So I will just ask the board at this time to raise their hand if they agree with the publishing of the materials. So if you could give me a show of hands that you approve of that action. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman, for keeping us in line with the new legislation that has occurred in this last session. That will get us up to date and in line with what needs to be done for our district. Is that true, Mrs. Whiteman? This is.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So at this time, we are down to our board work session. One of the things that I have been doing with KSB is attending some hearings about, or listening tours actually, about their new lobbying for Kansas school boards and what they will do at the State House and stand for. And the document is attached, and I thought I would just go through some of the changes that are in red and get your comment. We will be voting on this in November at the KASB convention. I'll be voting your voice at that convention to approve these. And so any feedback that you might have that I can share with them. But this has been looked at all over the state. They've had listening tours all over the state and gotten feedback from all districts, rural, very rural, metropolitan, suburban, for this document. So if we can go down to the very first red entry, the rest of it is the same as it was last year. We support repeal classification of the provision of SB 113 of 2023 regarding the disposition of district property. So this has come up because last year they passed in that bill that school districts have to give the first right of selling a building to the state of Kansas. The concern around that from the constituency is that those buildings could be bought up by the state to open new private schools. And a district cannot sell a property until the state has had first option. And so there is some, our lobbyists would like to have a stance on that schools would get fair market value because there's nothing written into the law about giving fair market value. And also, the concern of opening up, regaining the property to open up private schools that would compete against public schools. Any questions on that? The next red area, I'm sorry, I didn't give you much wait time. Bad on this teacher, I'm sorry. Everybody, any questions on that? Okay. The next part is about taxes, and we oppose arbitrary limits on taxes and valuations because of the long-term impact on revenues for schools and other public services. We urge caution and due deliberation in the consideration of tax policy. Any reduction in the statewide mill levy for K through 12 schools must be offset by other state funds. So this really wrapped around the idea of flat taxes across the state. And so there, would prefer not to have that flat tax which would increase or lower mill levies, property evaluations, et cetera, maybe falsely because of that flat tax. And so to protect the funding for public education, they would like to stand against that and have a voice to be able to lobby. Any questions there? Next page, red part. Mandatory open enrollment has also led to concerns about student safety in the receiving district. This has to do a lot around our SPED and at-risk students, because once They change in the open districts. Many times the schools feel like the funding is not following them. They don't have their IEPs in place. They don't have the support people in place to implement those IEPs. And so there's a huge concern about that open district and allowing parents to be able to move back and forth between schools, hoping to get services for their students, and schools just not being ready for those particular needs. We support allowing school districts to use either current year enrollment or the greater of the past 2 years enrollment to calculate state aid. The legislature would like to move that to just the year before or the prior year, instead of giving you the option to have the enrollment count for the two years prior. And before it's been whichever amount was higher in enrollment was the one that you would be able to use for your funding. And now they want to just whatever your enrollment was last year, that is what you would be looking for around your funding. And so they would like to keep in the law at least the 2 years prior combination. In order to best serve students, school districts should have local control over expectations of student engagement that exceed the CASHA minimum. So when we have open borders and students are able from private schools and homeschooling are able to come and use our services, particularly it's being used mostly in our instrumental and sports area, where students want to come and play on our sports teams or be part of our orchestras or band. And it's very hard to receive transcripts, grades, if they are in standing by the CASHA rules to participate. And so it has that possibility of bumping other students from the team without the paper knowledge behind it. Also, behaviors, being able to receive information on behaviors and things that you can put in place as they enter your school. But mainly it's around the grading and the transcripts that they are eligible to actually compete in the services that public schools give all students. We support school districts and students engaging in entrepreneurial pursuits for educational purposes and not being deemed in competition with privately owned businesses. So this is a very unusual one, but last 2 years, I believe, Genesis Gyms has been trying to get a position where they're not being taxed for their services and their businesses for any of their income by saying that high schools are encroaching on their business by having coffee shops, cafes, open gyms. And so basically it's what Genesis is trying to do is just not be taxed for their profits. So we felt like it was pretty important to be able to protect our high schools that are trying to open businesses and learn around businesses and, do business planning. And so we thought it was very important because they're doing this statewide. Genesis is evidently statewide. I don't know how large of a company it is, but it evidently is large enough that they are trying to take advantage of what's happening in our high schools. We oppose the practice of bundling K-12 appropriations with unrelated policies, especially proposals that have not received a committee hearing. So last year at the end of this session, our legislators decided to bundle everything into one bill to try to pass through the governor's desk. And many of those things that were put into that bundled bill, besides our education funding, there was all kinds of different things put into that bill. And many of those items had not had any testimony or hearings. And so we want to stand against the ability to just bundle a bill as like a dump bill to try to push through, you know, really good legislation with really bad legislation and putting that bill on the desk of the governor. Yes, sir. So on this one, it was interesting, and I'm not an expert here, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. And we might have an expert back here in the corner that could help us. But from what I understand, since there were budget items in the bill, the budget item piece gave her the ability to do line item. If it had not been like a budget piece in it, she had no ability to do line item. Am I correct, Mr. Garcia, on that? Yeah, yeah, because she pinned that budget piece there that gave her the ability to do that line item. So yeah, it was a little contentious, but that's how it worked out. So, but they understand that piece of it now, so they'll come back at it again. And that's the fear, and that's why it's on this document for Kansas Association of School Boards, so that we can at least testify, because if we have it on these papers, then they're able to step forward and testify and write in testimony and stand one way or another, stating that they have the support of all the Kansas school boards. And that's why we take action on the document. So grade level retention, we support local educators and families making decisions on the grade level retention. Our legislature should not interfere with parental rights by mandating a statewide retention policy. Additionally, research shows that grade level retention rarely, if ever, improves student achievement. This was brought up because the state of Tennessee was able to pass a bill 2 years ago that said that if students didn't pass their third grade reading assessment on their state assessment, that they would be able to retain any of those students in third grade. Well, it turned out that there was a much higher number of students that didn't pass that reading test in Tennessee, and they had to find a way to remediate all those students over a summer period, because most of the third grade across the state were going to be retained in third grade. And so there is some assumption that that will come across in some of the education committees about retention to improve state assessment scores. And so they wanted to have that stance and written in there, since it's already happened in one state, to make sure that they would have the ability to have all the research and everything in place to testify at those hearings. Any questions on that? Support efforts to create flexibility with CAPERS to enhance the recruitment and retention of school district staff. This is in a motion to try to remove the tier 3 of CAPERS, which is what our teachers, particularly our younger teachers, are involved in, where they have to create their own 401k. Our board has taken action on using a company, an investment company, to help teachers set up that retirement, and they wouldn't get the normal CAPERS that people who have worked for the district for many years are receiving. So there was no pension really for those teachers, except for what we're able to try to put in place for them. They want to remove that tier 3 and put everybody back into tier 2. And I have heard that there is some support for that to help in the retention and hiring of teachers, to at least give teachers a pension along with their pay. Yes.
Ms. Bowley, what is the difference between CAPERS 2 and CAPERS 3? Does anyone have any information on? I don't know.
So
maybe we'll have to have that revisited sometime
I'm seeing if Mr. Minky is back there, because he is the best person to really talk to that. And Capers 3 are where many of our new teachers land, and the difference in the retirement that they have in Capers 2. I see Dr. Gray stepped on out to ask Mr. Minky to stop on in and share with you the different financial loss that those of us in Capers 3 have compared to those of us in Capers 2. So when he
Yeah,
comes on.
there is something out on the internet. If it's out on the web, it's true, right?
Yeah.
About Capers retirement system plan comparisons. And I know some of it, being a former state employee, has to do the date in which you were hired. But this lays out the different who's included, the contributions, employee versus employer credits.
I'll look that up. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I can share it with Miss Lister and she can send it out to the board.
Yes. So it's basically the question of, do teachers have a pension or they don't have a pension and just rely on basically a mutual fund or something that is reliable on the market?
So it's our understanding and feeling that Capers 3 is a better tool for, or is not?
Capers 2.
Okay, Capers 2 is better.
We want to get everybody back into Capers 2 so they have a pension,
Okay.
which they don't have now from the state of
I want to
Kansas.
make sure I understand this correctly. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Correct. Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And the last one, we support flexibility for school districts to avoid legal penalties if budget documents and hearing notices are not published in a timely manner or contain errors due to factors beyond the district's control. So as we all know, we're losing our weekly or daily papers to publish the hearings that we need to. The state requires us to publish in a written document, like a newspaper of some sort. And many of our towns across the state do not even have a newspaper anymore. Some of them only have a quarterly newspaper. Some of them, like Marion, who was raided and basically closed down, missed the hearing that we all had put in the newspaper. I'm trying to think of what that was that we just did with our budget. They weren't able to do that because their newspaper was down at that time. So they really want to talk about possibly changing the law in the state to create it, like maybe using social media or other forms of being able to publish the public hearings in a timely manner required by the state of Kansas. So that's what that looks like. Oh, look, an expert.
As she begins to talk, Mr. Gowan's going to pull up the document on the screen. All things money they enjoy speaking about. So Ms. Mansfield, do you want to comment on Capers, the difference between Capers 2 and 3?
Okay, so, all right, so there's 3 different tiers to Capers. Capers 1, I know that wasn't your question, but that was most people that were in the old traditional plan, Capers plan, are in the tier 1 plan. Tier 2, they changed some of the characteristics of the pension plan. In tier 2, for instance, the magic 80, the combination of age and years of service when people can retire earlier, that was taken away from tier 2. So there's the rules changed it in tier 2, and there's some the interest factors that actually have the years of service rates and how your money grows in Capers. That plan 2 is different than plan 1. That was one of the differences. Plan 3, it operates more like a cash plan, more like a 401k. It's not a pension plan. It's more of a whatever, you input in the plan, you get that out plus interest. But plans 1 and 2 are true pension plans, unlike the tier 3. That's one of the biggest differences between 1 and 2. They're pension traditional.
Perfect.
plan.
I understand exactly, okay,
Yeah.
what the issue is. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Which also means anyone in tier 3 will not have enough money to retire. That's,
Yes.
I mean, that's.
And I
amazing.
guaranteed, with a true pension plan, it's guaranteed for life. Yes.
And the 401ks and the fees that are associated with oftentimes eat at the growth of the, yeah.
And you won't get payments for life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
So the
Thank
hope
you.
is that replacing a pension plan for teachers will also help in hiring new teachers, retaining teachers, because there's so few pension plans out there anymore. So it's that push for that idea. So that's what I have. Like I said, we attended quite a few regional meetings to get all the feedback because Kansas is such a diverse, very diverse state. And so getting that feedback is really important. Do any of you have any concerns on moving this forward and allowing me to vote for this at the convention? Ms. Lister, do we have to have an actual vote on that at the next meeting since we discussed it at this one?
It's just a consensus.
Okay. Do we need to have a show of hands for consensus?
If you want to do that tonight or next time.
Okay. Would you like to have a little bit of time to look this over, think about it? Or go ahead and have a vote of consensus? Although I do have a question down at the end from Dr. Bonebrick. Oh, we're voting. So let's go ahead and vote for it. Yes. Yeah, you have a question.
I do. My question is with this, well, first of all, I want to commend your grasp of these issues. You really spoke very eloquently about all of these changes in this particular document. So you apparently learned a lot.
I have learned a lot.
and appreciate you sharing that with all of us. My question is, with the information that's on here, and Dr. Anderson actually alluded to it earlier, is the idea to take this information that's captured on this KASB document and translate it into the United Voice document? Because I see an awful lot of crosswalk in between that United Voice document and this one.
So Kansas Association of School Boards hires people to be our lobbyist at the state building. And this document allows them, for instance, if something comes up in the legislature that isn't on this document, they don't necessarily have the right from their body of people to testify for or against. So this document is trying to cover everything they think that may come up and gives them permission to lobby for all of us as a school board across the state. And so KSB pays these people to be our lobbyists, and this is their document to follow to do the lobbying for us.
I see.
And-
Okay.
Mr. Tatum, to that question, if I can,
Please.
Ms. Foley, that where there is a crosswalk, for example, capers, we may take some bullets off of that, or teacher recruitment.
Sure.
Because it's similar and it shows alignment and it's duplicative to some degree, but special ed is another one. We'll see if there's anything under special ed. They had 2 or 3 bullets that we'll take and put under ours, or suggest. But again, the other gentleman and my other colleagues, they'll have to agree to that as well.
I see.
What we do know is the language that you're looking at is language from last year that we all agreed on. So we'll use that as a springboard to maybe tweak a little bit and add a few items.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions I just might be able to answer? So I think it's a good document. I think it gives them a lot to stand on. And they're very knowledgeable about what they're doing. So they were able to bring some things forward, such as all this red language that could be a concern for us. So I will take your vote to the floor then at the convention, and I believe it'll probably be passed. I'll let you know when it's over. Thank you for your time tonight on that. I appreciate that. So at this time, I believe we are down to board comments and committee reports. Dr. Bonebrick, you're going to lead us off?
The committees met. The Wellness Committee by raffle gave out a Yeti cooler last month. At the next meeting, they're giving away a wall exercise program thingy. But I managed to get the reduced Genesis membership, and evidently 80 people signed up this week at Genesis for the reduced membership and free. There's 4 free personal trainers. And again, as I said a while back, there's a boot camp weekly for 501 schools during November. I don't know what day it is. You'll have to call Genesis. The insurance committee is basically the same thing, touting the 3 apps that I've discussed before. Enough said. The finance committee met, and let me turn that off. Does everybody get 4 spam calls a day? Jeez.
Just you.
Yeah. I don't even like spam. Anyway, we discussed all the grants, and there's evidently 200 grants a year that 501 has to apply and reapply. They're worth about $1 million. Biggest grants, there are some federal ones like ESSER 3. It was like 16 million, which we're probably not going to get again. And we're wondering how we're going to replace that. But it's a lot of work doing these 200 grants every year. So we've got some full-time staff doing that, but it's worth several $1 million. And that's all I have, except an alarming statistic. The majority of postgraduate positions in the United States are taken up by temporary foreign visas. So foreign countries are taking advantage of our postgraduate degrees and studies. We're not filling them, so our universities want to fill them with somebody, so we're using all the foreign graduates. And they take them because they're so well qualified. Why are they so well qualified? It's because they're good education. Why are they getting a good education? They test better internationally in math, science, and language than we do. We're now 33rd out of 77 countries. Used to be number 1. And this legislative study for targeted spending is comparing apples and oranges. And, you know, it's just hard to compete internationally when we're not doing the education that we should be for our greatest natural resource. That's the only joke I have.
Dr. Schumacher.
I had a personnel committee just prior to this. We talked a little bit about, you know, ongoing, like looking forward towards next year and beyond, and well, even just the spring semester and beyond, and just continuing to try to maybe widen our net to try to attract and recruit, but also retain our highly qualified staff and our teachers. And then we did briefly touch on, kind of like Dr. Bonebrick, on you know, looking forward, how do we support those teachers to recruit and retain financially, but also starting to cross that bridge of ESSER funds running out, and how that looks moving forward. So I think it's good that the different committees are talking about that and keeping an eye on that, because that'll be a big hurdle for us all. And then I appreciate Mr. Edwards coming tonight. I appreciate what Dr. Anderson had put forward as far as getting our community of parents and our community of teachers to continue to advocate. You know, we talk about the our goals for a legislative agenda, and it's kind of like hitting your head on a wall over and over, because it feels like there's a lot of great ideas there, and maybe some of the people that are making these decisions aren't listening, and already have preconceived notions about educators and preconceived notions about the KASB. And even though I think, you know, if you look at KASB, it's remarkable, and you know, Ms. Boley, you touched on this, the breadth of people that the KASB represents. There are many different Kansans that sit on school boards, and there are many different districts, and they are supporting all of them. And I think it would be helpful if some of the people making those decisions remembered that. But it, you know, like Mr. Edwards said, the people that these legislators care about are the people voting for them in their district. So I am happy that we continue to push that forward, at least in our little neck of the woods, because advocacy is key. And I think that's all that I have. Thank you.
Mr. Tatum.
Well, I'm glad that Dr. Bonebrake was able to cover some of the information from the insurance meeting, because I wasn't able to be there, but I was able to also be at the finance and budget meeting. He covered quite a bit of that. The only thing I would add is that Ms. Mansfield, who we already heard from as an expert, she gave a very great presentation of kind of the overview of funding that goes into the bucket for Topeka Public Schools. It was kind of a broad overview that really did give me a sense of how things are allocated and what sort of funding streams that we, you know, kind of work with on an annual basis. So it was very good information. And then on the heels of that, Ms. Dean gave a presentation on the early education budget. So she drilled down a little bit deeper on one specific area of the broad picture of the district budget, and really kind of gave us a good idea of the different locations of I'm blanking out, the different schools that are providing learning resources for our kids, especially those that are pre-K. She talked specifically about Sheldon Head Start, Pine Ridge Prep, and Shaner, and just the resources that are being used at those places to help provide for the kids who are not yet in kindergarten to be able to get off to a rolling start. And that was really important to me because that's one of the reasons why I was interested in joining the board, was to advocate for pre-K education. So I really got a lot out of that presentation. And one of the things that I learned overall is that of the total Topeka public school budget, we get our funding from the federal government. 95% of it comes from the federal government, 4% of it comes from the state government, and 1% of it comes from local sources. So I thought that was very intriguing. I had no idea that the federal dollars were really an outsized source of income for the district, but that was really eye-opening, and I learned a lot from that meeting that we had just last week. I think it was last Thursday. So the only other meeting that I have had is one that occurred earlier today. It was the Topeka Public Schools Foundation meeting, and it was an interesting meeting. Of course, in that meeting, there's a lot of conversation about the foundation and the money that is a part of the foundation, and where current revenues are, and how that money is growing in the different funding mechanisms that are available. But some of the things that were talked about, I thought was pretty intriguing, and wanted to share that with the rest of the board. There was a community breakfast for the foundation very recently. I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to go. I did not. I was working. So I'm glad that there was some representation on the board. I saw highlights on the news, and it looked like everybody was having a really good time. Okay, mostly. But apparently the decision to move it indoors this year was a very good one, because I think it was raining that day. So Miss Johnson Betts was definitely thankful that she didn't have to wipe down wet chairs or anything like that to bring everybody to the meeting. There's also some educational grants that the foundation does, and there'll be some things happening with those grants coming soon. That's all I'm gonna say about that. It's pretty exciting. And then apparently every November, the foundation does a presentation to us. And I vaguely remember that from last year. But it sounds like they're really kind of geared up to do that again this year. Although it looks like mid-November looks like a good time for that to occur. I don't know if that's something that we've got coming up on our agenda. Although Ms. Johnson Betts said that she may have a conflict on the 16th, but other people from the foundation could certainly be here to kind of represent that. Dr. Anderson, looked like you were going to say
Well,
something.
no, we were going to propose the first meeting, because I think the second meeting may be other matters that you may already have listed.
Okay.
And so, but if she's available at that first meeting in November, we'll be asking Ms. Johnson.
Okay.
For that
Okay,
date.
great. That sounds fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. And I think they'll have some great information to share with the rest of the board. The only other thing I'd say about that meeting is the next foundation meeting will be on January 16th of 2024, because it's a quarterly committee meeting, and they're anticipating having a new board member at that time, because one of them will be retiring between now and that first meeting in January. So a lot of great information from the meetings that I attended recently, and that's all I've got.
Thank you. Mrs. Schmidt.
All right, Dr. Bonebrake and Keith covered health insurance. Our policy committee meets next week. Just want to take a moment again to thank our physical therapists, our physical therapist assistants, our audiologist, and shout out to our custodial staff because they're kind of our unsung heroes behind the scenes. As a child, I always knew who our custodians were. And it takes a special heart to take time and build relationships with kids. And that's what they do, make sure our kids are seen and heard. So that is amazing. I want to thank everybody who filled out the survey that was sent out on behalf of the board by KASB. Last I heard, we were getting some really good results in. So I, for one, cannot wait to hear and see what everyone has to say, which will allow us to be very focused as a board in where we spend our time and resources. So I'm looking forward to hearing those voices. I also want to call out, I know it kind of goes at the same time, the Dr. Church's Emporia State's Kansas teacher retention survey that has gone out, I believe, once. I think there was going to be some push to get it out again. The mission behind that survey is they are focused on measuring, understanding, interpreting, and disseminating data-driven insights regarding driving factors of teacher retention within school districts and across the state of Kansas. It is important for our staff to fill that one out as well. So I appreciate the time that they take from lesson plans and everything else that is nagging for their attention. But it will allow our district leadership to compare the results to the previous response 2 years ago. And if we have a response rate of 30% or above, we get to see the on-light reporting. So we want that. So thank you in advance.
We had a meeting with the Intergovernmental Council executive meeting, and we talked about health, specifically mental health. And there was a new resource that's coming online. I'm trying to remember who was the group who was there talking about the new.
The deputy director for Kansas Department of Health.
There you go. Yeah. And there's a new resource coming out into opening up on Fraser. Is that right?
Yes, and Ashley Goss is that person, and then Mr. Freed with the
Yeah.
Service and Guidance.
Yeah, there you go.
just opened up
So
a-
just, so we talked how these sources are coming online, more resources, and the interaction between what the work that they're doing and students that we have in our district and the need for that. And so how it'll go about to sort of have a positive impact for our students. I've been to a number of different events, artwork show at Noto, flashlight tour of Topeka High. That was interesting because I'd never been in the catacombs. I don't know if anyone's been there. My first time. I heard about it, but so I went with my daughter, who's in 8th grade, and was fascinated by that. So yeah, so a very interesting way, and that was put on by the PTO as a fundraiser for them. So also attended Robinson Middle School where they had a grandparents' day. We often hear about grandparents' days in elementary schools, but I thought that was interesting to have our middle schools continue to engage grandparents who are an important part of so many lives of our students. And so I thought that was interesting, and I enjoy getting to know a number of individuals there. The last thing I'll say is that I attended a couple of Hall of Fame events, and so often school systems and Topeka Public Schools is included are graded on the immediate effects of students and how they do on tests. I came away with two things. One is that our students who graduate from Topeka Public Schools, that so often we don't always hear of amazing individuals who point to Topeka Public Schools as the genesis of where they were prepared for the success that they've had. And invariably, so many of those students talked about the teachers and the relationships and the impact that they received here at Topeka Public Schools that was influential in their success later on in life, not immediately, but later on in life. And in addition, these alumni who were highlighted talked about sometimes how some of their failures led to some of the most success because the learning that comes about from that. So I wanted to say that so often we lose track of some of our alumni who go on to do amazing things in places all over the state, country, around the world. But just to reiterate my faith that we are doing an amazing job trying to reach as many students as possible. And much of that is because of our teachers. So that's all for me. Ms. Bowley.
Thank you. Thank you all. I've sat on some of these committees that have been reported on. And one that I would like to talk about, since you all talked about the others, is I am on the board of directors for Kansas State High School Activities Association, KSHA, as most of us want to call it. We met on Monday and talked about changes to the rules for the sports of Kansas. And we had our athletic directors there, and they were able to vote thumbs up or thumbs down on some of the executive decisions that were made on some of those changes. And they did a very nice job representing Topeka Public Schools. And that is also basically kind of like a listening tour. They will go out to other regions in the state and get that same thumbs up or thumbs down on those votes, and then bring that back to the executive committee to decide on making those changes. So that was very interesting, since I grew up in a time of no Title IX. So I'm learning a lot there also. We weren't able to play those sports. I also want to make comment about public education in the United States. I know Dr. Bonebrake really likes the European model a lot. And I want to say in the United States, we educate all students that come through our doors. In the European model, they have a branching off of students that are highly qualified, highly educated, that go into the upper levels of education. And then the other ones go into more of the trade area. As I listened to the State Board of Education's meeting this month, they were talking about all the gains in our high schools of certification for the trades in our state. So we are releasing many more students to take those jobs. So hopefully the Europeans don't have to come over and take those jobs. We should have a good pipeline of students that come in and have all the certification needed for the United States to do those jobs. I also wanted to say I was at the Topeka High Orchestra and got to view personally the maintenance that is taken care of there, and the lighting and the sound system. It was amazing. And so I wanted to thank our maintenance department and all of that crew that have made that better. I know that there's still one more level to do. I'm not sure why, because it was quite amazing. And of course, the orchestra they were amazing. They've only had one quarter to get those students to play like they did, and it was beautiful. Also, each member who has not turned in their dates for retreats, your favorite dates, Ms. Lister has sent each of you an email to respond to those dates. So I think we still have a few that need to respond to those dates. So if you could respond by the end of this week, that'll help us plan for Dr. Weisman. If you really want to have fun in the city of Topeka, the Halloween parades are about to erupt across our city and every elementary school. So if you want some fun, I would head out there and stand on the sidelines and watch those kids walk by, because it is entertainment, all free at a very high level. I want to thank you all for your time tonight. And if I could have a motion for adjournment, that would be amazing. Yes.
Madam President, I move that the board adjourn.
Vote. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And thank